That bunch of soldiers over there, I cannot reach them, but maybe I can apply some cunning to my arrows. Well, we're about to find out. Hi, it's Todd from Todd's Workshop and Todd Cutler here, and I recently made a film about a medieval arrow hack that allows your arrows to shoot further. And that's a good thing, because those dirty knaves out there have set themselves up about 20 paces beyond my bow shot, and I really want to take them down. I modified my arrows in a few different ways to try and get a greater range. But the one that really worked was I simply stripped off the feathers, possibly one of the more ridiculous things I've done. I didn't think in my mind for a moment that that would work. Who knew? Well, apparently you lot knew, because the comments section went crazy busy with information, suggestions, analysis of what was going on. So I've come back today to have a look at some of that, test some of that. But then we're going to come back for a third film where Joe Gibbs is going to bring down one of his super heavy war bows, and we're going to do some of this stuff for real. Right, back to our original premise. That bunch of soldiers over there, loiter sacks, churls, cumberworlds, every last one of them, have set up just outside my bow range. I cannot reach them. They are calling me names, me. They are giving me the hand signs, all of them. And there is now I can do about it. But maybe I can apply some cunning to my arrows. And then I can save my dignity and I can transfix the curs through and through. Okay, back to some normality and time for some science. So I've got my reliable test rig here, and I'm going to take 3 shots and average the distance. Okay, let's see what we got. So there we are. It's a pretty good group. It's about 2 meters wide, about 5 meters long, and needless to say, the pesky dribblers are out of bow shot. But one of the things that came up in the comments was the wind. Now, I can't control the weather, so again, there's a bit of a breeze, more moderate today than it was the other day. But there is something about headwind, tailwind, sidewind that I didn't realize. So let's have a look. Now, the wind is interesting because obviously a headwind blowing against the arrow, it'll fall short. A tailwind blowing behind the arrow, it'll make it go further. I didn't think that a side wind would actually affect that. I thought it would change the direction of it, but not the distance. But it was a comment that made me realise, and as soon as I read it, it's one of those things where you go, ah, of course. This is a lot smaller in surface area than the feathers. So when you have a side wind blowing against it, it tends to blow the back of the arrow out more than the front. That makes the effective size of these fletchings compared to airflow bigger. That creates more drag, less distance. So the thing is, a side wind will send your arrow off to one side or the other, but it also makes it fall short. In the previous film, one of the tests that I ran was that I removed the whipping here. So this thread which binds around the feathers, helping to hold them on. I figured that if we smoothed out the back of the shaft, it would reduce drag, the arrow would go further. I shot it and the arrow went a lesser distance. I wasn't expecting that as a result. Digging back through my knowledge of science and physics, I remember hearing about textured paint on boat hulls and on airplane wings, creating a layer of turbulence that somehow manages to reduce drag. In all of that, I just missed the completely obvious one of golf ball dimples, one that we all see every day, so to speak. So, looking back through the comments section, 2 things you really wanted to see was a whipped shaft, does that do it? And then golf ball dimples. Well, we're about to find out. Just weighed the arrows, they come in at an average 89 grams. Now, of course, I'm gonna add weight now as I whip them, and I wanna know how much I'm adding, just so we can get some feel for what's going on. So we whipped our shafts, and we're just gonna weigh them up again. So it's added about 2 grams per arrow, which is actually less than the difference between these shaft weights anyway. So I'm not expecting it to make much difference in terms of the weight, but will the whipping. Clearly this needs a load more testing, but maybe this increased boundary layer of laminar separation, apparently that's what it's called, will make all the difference. Let's see. Well, that's the last of them. Let's see what's happened. Ah, well short. There's one here and here. Ah, and the third just here behind the bush. I'm going to say 30 paces short of our control test. So that kind of whipping, rubbish. So let's put the marker in and then talk about this boundary layer stuff. So for the record, that is 30 paces short of our control group and 50 paces short of our churls. So what is this boundary layer of separation stuff? Well, it's pretty hardcore science is what it is. But essentially, if you've got a smooth surface, then the air, through a variety of mechanisms, as it travels over it, sort of sticks to it a little bit. And it can be quite a high drag surface. It's not perhaps what you'd expect. But if you add a little bit of turbulence through texture onto your projectile, whatever's traveling through the fluid or the air, a little bit of turbulence creates effectively like a lubricant layer. And the air doesn't stick to it so much, it just swishes off. That's my very approximate description of what's going on. Go and check it out in the notes. There's fantastic, proper descriptions of what's going on. But in the context of this test here, the idea was that by adding this, it might add that boundary layer of laminar separation to such an extent that this thing shoots through the air brilliantly and exceeds our targets and our desires. It didn't. It fell well short. It fell 50 paces short of our men. Obviously, it needs more testing, but in this case, maybe the thread's too heavy, it's too dense, it's not dense enough. I don't know. But whatever it is, didn't work. Rubbish for an arrow hack. So the whipping's no good, but of course you also suggested the power of the golf ball dimple. And who am I to disappoint? So we're going to strip the whipping off and we're going to dimple these shafts.
Oi, cock doodle, wait.
Right, for Spula. Right, but regardless of that, he's right. Because the thing is, if I dimple these shafts, then they're all going to be dimpled and it affects the rest of our tests. So I can't do that. So I've got another one, same weight as these, and I'm going to dimple that. But it is, I'm afraid, only going to be the one, but we'll shoot it 3 times because life's too short to dimple 3 of these. You'll understand when you've seen it. Hi, I've interrupted this film to tell you that bucklers are rubbish against arrows, as if you didn't know. But fortunately, Todd Cutler has come to your rescue because we have the I.33 sword perfectly coupled to fight with a buckler. And the thing is, if sharp is not your thing, maybe blunt is. So battlefield blunt or cutting sharp. Either way, I.33, same kind of characteristics and coupled to go beautifully with a buckler. And now back to the film. By the power of magic and my Fordham, let the golf balling begin. And here's our golf ball pimpled shaft, just as you asked. So this also creates a boundary layer. Will this work? Will it go further? I don't know. But the interesting thing about the weight is I weighed it before and after. It's lost about 1.5 grams. So that's actually far less than I was imagining. So this is coming through at about 87 grams. So basically still within the bounds of the other 3 arrows that we were shooting. Let's see what it does. And loose. And loose. Brilliant. Golf balls. Let's find out. So we've got a lovely tight group here of our 3 shafts. I actually shot the same one 3 times and just put markers down. It was at the lighter end of our control group arrows, but still should be going about the same distance, except we golf ball dimpled it. It took a long time to do, and the idea is it increased boundary effect. However, maybe it's done it too much. It's 16 paces short of our control group. So, pimpling an arrow shaft takes a long time and it's not worth your time. Don't do it. In the previous film, one of the modifications I did to try and reach those guys was to shorten the length of the feathers. Now, by doing that, I'm getting rid of some of this surface area here. I'm reducing the drag. And it did go further. But what I didn't think about really was that shortening the length of the feather still leaves all of this height. And most of the drag is caused by the frontal area of this feather cutting through the air. So by removing the length of it, it doesn't do nearly as much as it could as if I shortened the height of it. So what we're going to do now is take off the front half of the feather and we're going to shorten the back half of the feather as well. Is it going to make it go further? Well, it really, really should. Will it reach the guys? I don't know, but let's test it now. And loose. Smaller fletches? Well, it should work. There are the churls. That is our control marker, first 3 shafts. We've got the golf ball dimples a little bit down there, and quite a long way down there, we've got the whip shaft. Look at this. So, these ones are the cut down feathers, remember, in both length and in height. That's the first one. That's the second one. And wait for it. Where's it gone, where's it gone, where's it gone? There is the third one. Wahey! We got them, and we got like the 3rd rank as well. They won't be smug anymore. So we're going to put the marker down for the average, which is about 1 pace beyond them, which is rather fantastic. Our medieval arrow hack modifications work. Now, whether they did it is a different thing, because I've got no evidence that they did, but we have got evidence that it works. However, it also worked rather well without any fletchings on it. So let's have a look at that. I'm going to strip the fletchings off, and while I'm doing this, seeing as you liked it so much last time, here are some more arrow strikes set to music. Let's shoot! And go. So past the first marker, second marker. So we're coming up towards our line of men now. Well, obviously not real men. Cardboard cutouts, and insulting ones at that. But, okay. Harder to spot now without the feathers.
There's another.
Yep. Where's number 3? That took some looking. Here it is. So, let's pull that. That is quite a long way offline. This is the only arrow, bear in mind, which has gone significantly offline all day. And we are, what, 10, 12 paces off the line. So I'm going to move this now over there, just so we can get an idea for our averaging. So our arrows, without fletching, were 8 paces beyond the men, which is brilliant. I mean, that's absolutely fantastic. So in terms of medieval arrow hack, does this work in getting greater range? Yes, it absolutely does. But the other thing to note about this is, of these 3 unfletched arrows, the only crazy outlier we had in terms of offline was one of these. And the width of this grouping was far worse than any of the others, and it was 18 paces wide. Remember that. So that was fantastic to see. They clearly went further. They shot cleanly. The grouping was all right. I mean, it didn't have feathers on it. But what I mean by all right is if you're going for one individual person, you're not going to strike them because they were a little bit all over. But the thing is, at this kind of range, you're not going for an individual, you're going for a body of men. So if I shoot him or him or him or him, I don't care. I need to get there. That's the important thing. I need to get my arrows into that group of men. Accuracy, not so important. But the thing is, that result of them actually flying cleanly was wholly unexpected to me. I just didn't think it was going to happen. So I went and checked out the comments section, which of course came to my rescue, and it is always your friend. The comments on my videos tend to be absolutely brilliant. Go check them out. So I'm going to put this into my own words, but essentially the surface area along all of this shaft length is pretty much the same from front to back. So that means the area of lift, the centre of that surface area, is about in the centre of this shaft. But it's got a heavy head on it running in at about 30 grams. And that means that the centre of gravity is a long way in front of the centre. It's about here. And having that big distance between these 2 points makes it inherently stable. Because as it flies through the air, it will pivot, if it wants to disappear off in a funny direction, around the centre of gravity. But this area is far bigger than that area that's being pushed by the airflow. So if it tips offline, it will tend to tip the tail back to straight again. If it goes the other way, it'll tip it back to straight, tip it back to straight. So its inherent desire is to go basically in a straight line. And that's what I fundamentally didn't understand. But I don't want to be a driveler. So to find out if these arrow shafts without feathers will shoot cleanly from a longbow, we're getting Joe Gibbs back in for the next film with one of his monster war bows. And then we will all know. But the thing is, there's one other question that we absolutely have to answer, and Joe is going to help with. Because these are cheaper to make without fletchings. They're easier to transport. You can carry more of them. They last longer. They shoot further. All of these are essential things. They're fantastically useful things for an army. And yet they didn't do it. Logistically, it would have been heaven for an army, but they didn't do it. Why didn't they do it? We're going to have a look at that in the next film with Joe. I hope you enjoyed this film, and actually I have loved making this series. But don't forget, we've got a second YouTube channel, Todd Cutler, and of course we've got our website, toddsworkshop.com, where you'll find both cutler and workshop goods. So if you like this kind of stuff, you will find fantastic array of weaponry there, all sorts of stuff and things that you will be interested in. And of course we've got our Patreon page. So for doing films like this, it's really useful support. Thank you very much. See you again.